So hi everybody. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you for having me here. I'm quite nervous, but I'm excited to share this project. So like you said, I'm a graphic designer, and I'd say I very recently caught the type bug a couple of years ago. And yeah, I'm excited to be sharing this project with everybody. But before I dive into Aksharaala Aata itself, I'd like to start off by giving you a little bit of a context about myself. So I grew up in a small town called Tanuku in Andhra Pradesh, India, until I was in first grade. And in Tanuku, my world looked a lot like this. Um, and then for schooling around right after first grade, we moved to Hyderabad, and my world started to look a lot more like this on the right. And I think somewhere along the way, Telugu slowly moved to the background in my life, especially the script. So I did study Telugu as a second language in during my schooling, and we were taught Grandhika Bhasha. And Grandhika Bhasha is a more formal literary version of Telugu. It's very unlike colloquial everyday speaking Telugu, and it was primarily taught and learned through rote memorization. So that's a little bit about my background and my kind of relationship with Telugu over the years. And then let me just fast forward to grad school and doing the MFA in at CC MFA in design. I think that's where I really my love for type really bloomed. And I was fascinated with expressive type, and it started to show up in a lot of my work. And soon I was very instinctively drawn to exploring Telugu letter forms. And that's probably because, it's my mother tongue and I had some kind of a connection to it. And I was so used to seeing experimental, expressive typography in English, but not so much in Telugu or other Indic scripts. And that was probably because of the amount of exposure I had. I was just about getting into enjoying type and looking around for inspiration. So I started tinkering. I started sketching, lettering, experimenting with motion, movement and perspective, playing with like woven forms. And I think while doing this, I started to reconnect with this script, started to learn the alphabet again. And I think through these, and I started to reconnect through materials that I was familiar with. I was very unaware of type design and the technicality behind it. And I was taking a lot of inspiration from cultural influences from that I had throughout my life. And I also finally did go in blind and designed my first Telugu typeface, and it helped me a lot. It helped me a lot in understanding the complexities that went on behind designing for scripts like Telugu. And during that time, I started looking more closely at typographic references from back home, movie posters, magazine covers, print archives. And I was really drawn to Satyajit Ray's magazine covers and the detailing on the Chandamama magazine covers, and uh, and even those on Kumar magazine. And I was actually introduced to Kumar magazine by Kalapi, so that was a treasure trove. And I started noticing things, very interesting counters or the way talakattus were drawn in these mastheads. And I was really drawn to how uh, they used type to essentially express the context or the content of those magazines. And it was inventive, and they got me thinking about how much room there still is to explore new kinds of form making for Indian scripts. And parallelly around that time, I was also collaborating on a quick 2 week sprint with a friend, Rowan, on a project we called Dichroic Play. It was an interactive light and shadow installation where people used the dichroic panels and uh, the sunlight to create letter forms through shadows. And those shadows that they created, the letter forms or patterns, they kept shifting. It was affected by the time of the day, the amount of wind that was around at that time, or the angle of the sun. And it required a kind of mindful engagement that really stuck with me. And this sparked my interest in more participatory design systems, where, like, I guess meaning was created not just by the designer, but also interaction and getting people to be more aware of external factors that influenced form making. Yeah. And I think that finally brings me to Aksharaala Aata. That opened up the doors to Aksharaala Aata for me. And yeah, Aksharaala Aata essentially translates to a game of letters. Um, so it's a growing collection of analog tools that kind of invite people to play and build Telugu letter forms, especially for those like me who may be familiar but have lost touch with the script. And so one of the tools is a set of modular stencils inspired by, the visual grammar of Telugu letter forms. I spent time drawing and with lettering and sketching the letters, and I started to distill the script into their simplest geometric forms. And I think by separating like form and meaning, I was trying to sort of invite more playful reconstruction. And I was trying to sort of blur that line between legibility and expression. Um, so the green stencils, the green stencil set is numbered. And here the vowels and consonants are distilled essentially into 20 shapes. And yeah, so if you see on the top right, that's kind of how I imagined using the stencils and drawing out the letters. But it was very interesting when I gave out like little place cards to others familiar with the script, but sort of out of touch. And when they started drawing the letter forms and how they started thinking about sketching those letter forms. And for those less familiar with the letters, essentially, the numbers on the bottom right of the place cards can guide them to use a specific selection of stencils to construct those letters. But the structure and the construction of the letters are left to their imagination. The pink stencil set introduces the Vattalu and Gunintalu, which are the conjunct attachments, and they can also be used to create the base letters, but primarily I had started thinking of ways to bring in the attachments. And people can mix and match the stencils, and both stencil sets can be used together or separately. It's completely up to the designer. And it was amazing to see people use, or I guess misuse, these tools, although there's no way to misuse them, I feel. And it sort of revealed ways in which they were using their own logic or creativity in constructing these letter forms. And people use them in ways that obviously I also didn't originally design them for, which was exciting. Um, I recently got to showcase the stencils in Aksharaala Aata at SF Design Week. So it was up in Gantry Studio here in San Francisco. And it was nice to see people who were absolutely unaware of the script figure out how to draw it. And sometimes they didn't draw the letter forms. They just kind of had fun with the stencils, which was also fun to watch. Oh, and this was very exciting for me. So last month, I graduated and I had a bunch of nephews and nieces visiting me here in San Francisco. And they were here at home and they were so excited to start. They saw my stencils during my thesis show. And when they were home, they were so excited to make these letter forms and use the stencils. And they spent like an entire afternoon with them. And I was so happy to see how they process it, right? How they see the letters on the top left, and then they start stacking the stencils and starting to draw the letters. And I felt like it really creates a moment of like this cognitive tension where you recognize the letter or you recognize the shapes that make the letter, but the path to get there with the stencils is a bit unfamiliar. And I think that process really opens up space for some unexpected moments. So in the center over here, you can see like my 7-year-old niece. She had written down her name using the stencils, which is nice to see. Yeah, so there's this concept from Victor Shklovsky's artist technique essay, and he calls it defamiliarization. To make the stone stony, he says. And the idea is to make the familiar strange, to so that we perceive it anew, basically. And this is what the stencils do, or that's what my intention was, to sort of dislodge habits. And they kind of invite you to build letters and with curiosity instead of like the focus being on correctness. Um, and especially for those who grew up with Telugu but lost fluency, there was this joy of seeing uh, something that you know but remade in like unexpected ways. And it was exciting for me to see that happen to other people who were in my situation. And it really pushes for more mindfulness, even when reading like the outcomes. Like, let's say I've written down my name or whatever I've written down. When I show it to my sister, for example, it really requires for her to be more like mindful when reading it too, and really focus on the forms to make sense of what uh, is written. So that was nice. I guess another open-ended exploration of the letter forms that I did was through weaving. And I was really inspired by reed mats from back home. We call them chapalu, and we used to have a lot of them back at home. So I was drawn to them just as a graphic language. And then I was also interested in bringing that tactile making and thinking into letter making. So I feel like this whole weaving a letter form really gets you to think about the shape of the letter that you're making, and the width or the weight of the letter. Is it like bottom heavy or top heavy? Is there a lot of contrast, and how the corners attach and taper? And it really embraces like sort of slowness in making and being continuously refining what you're making. And here I think weaving, beyond just being a technique, it again goes back to the idea of tinkering and like iterative discovery. And I think I like this kind of work because I think intellectual, like we, I think we intellectually think about the world through touch or through friction or pressure or through these tinkering modalities. And I think it's downplayed how intellectual and how useful that kind of thought can be in discovering how things work or how things can be made. Um, yeah. So with Aksharaala Aata, essentially uh, it became about reimagining learning through joy and discovery and agency. Um, Not just about literacy or like learning the script. And it's about giving people the tools to explore and question and construct meaning with their hands and minds. Um, and one of the idea that stayed with me from a conversation I had had with Ramon Tejada, he's a designer and educator, was this term that he used, generous tools. He described them as tools that are open-ended, that trust people to bring their own perspective, that don't dictate one way of doing something. And I think that really struck home to me because, as I'd mentioned, I think when I was taught um, as a kid in school, or like when I learned the alphabet or whatever, it was much more of like a rote memorization thing. So I wasn't actively making them, and I felt like that also led to me forgetting a lot of things, not just with alphabet, but even just any subject in school had a lot to do with rote memorization. And I kind of wanted to steer away from that. And, this idea of trusting people to come up with their own perspective also is something I enjoyed exploring. Yeah, so that's what Aksharaala Aata is. It's sort of a playground at that intersection of spontaneity and deliberation. And I believe it's very important to make space at that intersection. And these tools like stencils or modularity are not new. I don't think I was trying to reinvent the wheel. Um, and we especially see a lot of examples of modularity in English because maybe the alphabet set is more limited and the script is simpler. But I think it's time we push for it for more complex scripts like Telugu as well. And because these tools are trying to arrive aren't trying to arrive at a singular answer and or meant to be perfect or polished. I think they're pushing for a more like pluralistic approach to Indic scripts. Um, and they're about play and about planting these seeds for future typeface ideas and lettering ideas. So that's so right now, actually, I'm working on this typeface, which long way to go, and it doesn't have a name as of yet, but it was born out of like weaving experiments that I had done with the weaving frames. And I'm also trying to work on creating a playbook for Aksharaala Aata because I want to make these tools more accessible. I'd love for Aksharaala Aata to, travel to schools or homes or workshops, anywhere people might want to reconnect with the language through design. And yeah, it's definitely a growing project and one that I'm quite excited to keep evolving. More tools, hopefully more collaboration and much more play. Yeah, that kind of brings me to the end. And I'd just like to thank everybody who helped me think through this work, mentors, friends, collaborators, and the many people who kind of used the tool and taught me so much more about how I could use the tools. And yeah, thank you to all of you for listening and for letting me share this joyful little project.
Super nice, Ramya. Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of open the floor to questions since we have time. You squeezed it in pretty well.
Thanks.
We've added Ramya's bio and social sites in the chat as well. Okay, I'll ask something. What's next for you?
Next for me in terms of type design and Aksharaala Aata, or next in terms of like work
However
in
you'd like to answer that.
I think in terms of I think there's like an unbelievable amount of things that I'm yet to learn about just type design or lettering or just like training my eye and hand. So I want to focus on that in terms of type design. I've been I have a few fonts that I designed for Telugu that I'm not very familiar with font engineering, and some people have reached out to support me with that. So I'm excited on working with that. I think like a year ago, or maybe a little less than a year ago, Kalapi was kind enough to talk to me and guide me through that process. So everyone's been really approachable, I'd say, in terms of wanting to learn more about type design, especially for Telugu. So I want to do much more of that. Yeah, and in terms of design in general, I want to push myself to keep like working in the space of play, but I also want to train myself further in terms of uh, designing systems, visual systems. Yeah.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Hi, Ramya. This is Srivardhan. I'm also Telugu speaking guy. I'm from Visakhapatnam.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello. So this is amazing work. Looking at the tools that you're trying to create when it comes to Aksharaala Aata, using different shapes and forms to make the letters, and also even the weaving mats as well. Like they are kind of like very local in those states. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see these fonts? And I mean, it's open to others as well, like even Kalapi and Namrata. How do you see Telugu fonts or maybe these fonts actually evolving, like maybe being used in brands or maybe on different scale, because they're not really commonly used languages right there, right? And people don't really spend a lot, sometimes there could be issues of maybe money and finances as well. So yeah, how do you see the type Telugu type going forward in the professionally?
I think Telugu, or as is with any kind of vernacular scripts, I think Latinization of these scripts has happened for so long, and for like names of things, just using Latinized scripts for vernacular names and things like that. But it's been used for so long because Latin fonts were just available and like more designs were available. It's gonna just take some time, I think. Of course, building like partnerships with your friends in the graphic design industry and all of that really helps. And over time, I think it's also like both type designers and graphic designers, as much as you kind of showcase, people will feel like, this is something we can, try out, or be willing to pay for something. And I mean, I've always said this, type designers are extremely like approachable. So even if people ask for a limited character set to test out a logo, etc., we're mostly quite open because we love to see our work being used. So I think it's just a matter of people willing to take that chance, to be honest, and we just kind of have to wait it out, I guess, till people start doing more of that. Pricing for sure, but I think it's always the full character set, etc., that takes that much space. But if like a customized job, a smaller job can always be worked out, I think. So the point is just kind of reach out to your graphic design friends, and graphic design friends reach out to type design people, and
Hmm.
figure a symbiotic relationship to make both the things better. According to me, that's the thing. But if Kalapi wants to weigh in a little bit also.
I I think everything you guys said is already been covered. I don't really have much to say. I used to have a lot to say, but I think I'm just looking to see how everything evolves, because type is part of a much greater infrastructure. And I definitely don't think that typeface designers are going to move the needle on language usage. I think there needs to be a lot more allied media that creates and produces content, for lack of a better word, in vernacular and in our indigenous languages. And the more we produce content, the more we have the opportunity to use type, and the more we see. So just quickly going back to Ramya's example with Kumar, this was kind of, like mid 20th century publishing initiatives in local languages, especially having to do with subjects in the humanities. And people didn't have access to production tools, right? Like, so if you want to make something and you're not a graphic designer, you can use Canva or something like that and like quickly put something together. And that was just not possible. So you had to use tools that were industrial, required a lot of time, effort, energy, cost. And in that regard, because Kumar was more of like a magazine about culture, like not just Gujarati culture, but well, basically cultural movements in Gujarat, but also talking about cultural movements from around the world, but translated in Gujarati, and like presenting the editor's perspective on those movements. There was an opportunity for applied artists of the time, calligraphers at the time, to kind of create these gorgeous mastheads, because there was no possibility to do anything with the type inside. You basically used mechanical typesetting, and there was not a lot of freedom to do anything with the typefaces themselves. Of course, you could do a lot with typography, and if you get to see the insides of a lot of these vernacular publications, you'll see really beautiful use like typography, even though the type is kind of the same everywhere. So now that type design is more democratized, we just need to have a cultural movement where a lot of the core culture that we kind of deal with is created in these languages, and then we'll have a chance to use those type. So yeah, it's not like which is why I'm like quiet about what typeface designers can do. What we can do is just make more fonts, and maybe there is some kind of a shift in the financial aspects or the economics of typeface production or font production, where it becomes easier to sell or to distribute fonts that are not priced at the same price as they are in the West. Yeah. Thank you so much.
For sure. We just realized that we have half an hour. So this could totally like turn into like a panel discussion, which was unplanned. But
I
if
think
there are people who want to weigh in, please feel free.
from like a perspective of a designer who's designing fonts and who's just entering type design without much context to it. Personally, when I see other people when I see more of, let's say, Telugu typefaces being made, then I'm like, oh, maybe even I can try something. So I feel like just seeing more, for example, expressive Telugu or Indic scripts inspires me to do more. And as people see more of this around, maybe brands will also get exposed to it and be willing to, I don't know, use them or invest in them.
For
But
sure.
that's the exposure I have right now.
Okay, yes, got it. Thank you. I mean, three different perspectives, and yeah, it's amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There's a question from Ashima. Ramya, what are your thoughts about extending Aksharaala Aata for more vernacular scripts and languages?
I mean, I think it's completely possible, and I think like um I was interviewing I think Peter Bilak, because he did a project called Q Project, which was also modular, sort of modular typography. And I was asking him, what do you think about modularity for index scripts or more complex scripts? And he was just saying any language can be modular. I mean, that's what a letter is. That's what I guess a script is. So I think it's just about spending that time to develop them. And I've seen people take these stencils that I've made and write other languages, not Telugu. Of course, English, because I think those letter forms are easy to design, but uh, maybe Hindi, maybe other languages. I think modularity is absolutely possible. And I think then the way I thought about the weaving thing is just thinking about what I was surrounded with visually. So I think as long as we have a source of inspiration and then we start thinking about tinkering with letter forms and then sort of bringing in inspiration from around us and these vernaculars, I think it's absolutely possible to extend it to other languages as well.
Yeah, super. Well, it was a great presentation. I think everybody kind of agrees. Yeah. There's also, I think Kalapi has plugged in a mentorship initiative, which you could take a look at to further improve and work on type design. But thank you,
Awesome.
Ramya.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else who'd like to talk about something?